Welcome to this week's ITS seminar. Got a great crowd here, and hopefully some more of you out there. I'm very pleased to introduce today's guest speaker, Brody Hamilton. Brody established the UC Davis Transportation and Parking Services Department back in 1987, our very own TAPS, and then directed that until 2000 when he went to Stanford to direct their parking and transportation services, PATS. TAPS, yeah. And was there until just this past spring when he moved on to become a consultant in travel demand management, and is actually consulting for Google these days. So I'm hoping we get to hear a little bit about that. It's really fun to have him here for all kinds of reasons, but one of the reasons is that Stanford and Davis have a very friendly rivalry going on. As you should know, the city of Davis was the first platinum-level bicycling-friendly city in the U.S., and at the same time, Palo Alto got designated gold level, one below Davis. So, well, I was getting to that, and then they established the program for universities, and much to our chagrin, Stanford got designated platinum level, and UC Davis was only gold level. So we were horrified by that and worked very hard, and I think we're platinum level now as well.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yay. So we've come back. And then, the travel demand management topic with respect to universities is so interesting because this really is the place where we can play around with it and try some different things. That's much harder out there in the real world. So great laboratory for so really looking forward to hearing about the work that Brody has done and continues to be doing. So welcome. Welcome.
Just anywhere on here. Yeah. Is it working? Yeah? Well, it's great to come back. My alma mater. I won't tell you how long ago it was that I graduated, but it was a while ago. So what I want to do today is go over transportation demand management in general, as well as kind of using Stanford as a case study. I know a lot of you do research projects and you talk about things in general in theories and philosophies. And as Susan mentioned, the university is a great place to really test things out. So many of the slides I'm going to show are from Stanford, the results that we got. So I want to go through and talk about TDM in general and different elements that you would find in a comprehensive TDM program, and then talk about how it appeared at Stanford, what form it took at Stanford, and then the results of having implemented those TDM elements at Stanford. Again, beyond just the theory, we had an opportunity to put a lot of this stuff in direct application. How many are familiar with TDM, Transportation Demand Management? Okay, so a good number of you. So basically, it's a process or program or policies to get people out of their cars or move people out of the peak commute time or have them somewhere else so they're not part of the traffic. They're not part of the problem or issue that we're dealing with. This is, if anybody goes out and wants to start a TDM program somewhere, these are the basic kinds of elements that you would probably want to consider in a TDM program. Whatever the organization is, you need to determine first off, why are we going to do this? Why is it important to the organization? Very crucial. Within that, you may also at that same time be defining the goals as well as the challenges associated with that. Especially in a university setting, but in any setting, you have to have the full support of the people that are in charge. If you try to set out and pull off a program and you don't have the support of the people upstairs, there are going to be so many roadblocks that you're faced with as you move along. Fortunately, at Stanford, it was just, for me, as I was telling Susan at lunch, it was like utopia. They brought me in. They brought me in and they said, here's the problem. How much money do you need? I said, okay, I think I'm going to need this amount of money. Okay, here's a budget for 15 years. Go do it. And they let me do it. I mean, there was no student oversight. There was no faculty oversight. There was no administrative oversight. It was like utopia for somebody in TDM. So, okay, enough of that. Program elements and resources. What are the things that you're going to wrap into the program that are going to serve as resources for the employees or the students, or basically the commuters that you're going to be working with? Partnerships are huge, whether they're with transit agencies or other governmental agencies. We did a lot with students and staff, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And then marketing and outreach. A lot of people think you build it and they will come. It doesn't work that way with TDM. You have to be out there marketing this, keeping it in front of people all the time. We're all on information overload. I mean, think of all the emails you get that you don't read, or it goes to some mailbox and you never quite get to that, and there's turnover in an organization. So all these things, you need to keep that information out there in front of people on an ongoing basis so you can create a wonderful program and people don't know about it, they don't take advantage of it, and people think it's a waste of money because it doesn't work. Well, it's because people don't know about it. So I'm going to spend a little time talking about that. Budget and funding, it's good to have the money. If you don't have a lot of money, you've got to rely a lot on other agencies, whether it's transit agencies, 511 type organization, regional rideshare, governmental agencies, and that sort of thing. I'm sure there are a lot of people in here that are into data. Very important to have the data, especially getting baseline stuff before you even get started, so that as the program progresses, you can show those people that are paying the money out for the program what kind of progress you're making. Just like if you've got grants, you want to keep those sponsors advised of what's going on. And then the metrics. What kind of results are there? You want to make sure you're keeping good track of the results. Again, that's going to be a way to share with the funders what kind of success that you're having. So just to use an example of that why within an organization you might want TDM, let's just talk a minute about Stanford. Community relations was huge, still is huge at Stanford, and the County of Santa Clara granted Stanford a general use permit, which was basically a permit to allow Stanford to grow by 2 million square feet of academic space and a couple thousand students. And there were I think there were 120 different conditions related to this growth permit. The one that related to transportation, there were a couple of them, but the big one was the no net new peak hour commute trips. Sometimes it takes a minute for that to sink in, but basically measured at the beginning of this program how many vehicles were coming into campus during the peak commute time, 1 hour period, the busiest 1 hour in the morning, and do the same thing in the afternoon. And that became our goal. We could not exceed that by 1%. So that became the big reason that we were doing TDM at Stanford. And there's a big shuttle system there called the Marguerite system. That's a great PR thing because we provide free transportation. As the program evolved in the mid, like 2004, 5, 6, sustainability became a much bigger issue within Stanford. And we could point to this in many ways, as I'll get to when we start talking about metrics, how getting people out of their cars could be good for the environment, good for air quality, a variety of other benefits associated with that. And then also later on, kind of after we got this thing up and running, realizing all the benefits to employees in terms of well-being. Mentioned here stress reduction, increased exercise, financial rewards. When I get into the marketing area, where we were really pushing these different benefits to employees to get them to use alternative transportation, I'll show you some of the things that we. And another thing that we kind of discovered later on was the reduced investment in parking. Huge. I mean, if a company or a jurisdiction wasn't interested in anything else, and they could look at how much money they could save by not building parking, by not having to finance that capital investment, by not having to maintain it, by not having to enforce it, and compare that to the cost of TDM, and I'll show you a slide on that later too, it can be very decisive. I mean, if they really look at it closely. Feel free to ask questions as we go along. I'm not one of those that will ignore you until the very end. So if you have questions. And how much time do we have? 30? Okay. Well, I'll try to time it properly. At Stanford, we were thrown into a situation where, okay, you're here, we're a year into the program, and we need to start reducing trips, and we need to meet this no net new peak hour commute trip. Can we all say that together? No net new peak hour commute trip. Because I'm going to stumble as we go along, even though I've been saying it for years. Approach the program with yes, but. Employees, commuters would use alternative transportation, but, well, it's expensive in certain cases. Tell you what, we'll give you a free train pass. Okay, well, if I come by commute by carpool or by train, and my child gets sick, I have to get home. Great, we'll give you a free ride home, either by taxi or we'll give you a rental car for free. Well, if I come, I might have to run some errands, personal errands, or do some business or something like that. No problem. We've got Enterprise Rent-A-Car on campus, and we've got Zipcar. It was fleet. So addressing all those issues so that we could create a program that addressed most of those yes buts so that people would not have a really good excuse not for using alternative transportation. And that's the benefit of putting together a really comprehensive program. Some folks may throw a couple of things out. They might have a rideshare matching system, or they might subsidize transit passes and so on. But if you don't put the whole program together and have all the synergy related to that, you're not going to see the benefits that you could see with a fully implemented comprehensive program. This is, I've labeled it Sample Comprehensive TDM Program. This is basically what we did at Stanford. Very extensive shuttle system. As Caltrain, the commuter rail use increased, we increased dramatically the shuttle service. So there was virtually a bus there with every train that came in, so people didn't really have to wait. Parking fee program, very big. Most of these are carrots. The stick was the parking fee. And I think if you speak with any consultant that's doing TDM kinds of things, they'll say, you need to have that because people don't like to pay for parking. And that's a great way to incentivize them not to drive. And in the case of Stanford, we had the parking fee, and then we rewarded people for not buying a parking permit. So there was this swing. You know, you'll pay $300 to $700 for a parking permit, but if you don't buy it, you save that, and on top of that, we're going to pay you $300. So you start talking some bucks after a while. Emergency ride home, mentioned that earlier. Transit information, make sure you get all the information out there for people, all the different ways that they can get in to work. Extensive website is huge. I've seen organizations, big organizations that haven't put any resources into the web. And it's pretty sad. And it's unfortunate because people go there and they get lost, or the information isn't there, and they just figure people are going to find out word of mouth or whatever. But it's really huge, having an extensive website. Ride matching, making sure you've got ways to get people to connect through van pools, car pools, and even identify bus schedules and routing and all that sort of thing. In the university setting, a bicycle program, I think, is really significant. UC Davis is known worldwide for all the bicycles that are here. And, I mean, facility things like the roundabouts on campus are huge. Stanford just built a couple of roundabouts in the core of campus. And how far is this going? The internet connection, how far does this go? Is this just on campus? Okay. So we'll leave it at that. They built a couple of roundabouts on campus. But the ones here at UC Davis are just incredible. Actually took videos of the ones here on campus and took some videos of how a couple at Stanford were operating. And it was like night and day. They've seen the light, and they're going to be making some changes. But really huge, both the incentive programs, the encouragement programs, the education programs, the facility improvements, and all those sorts of things, especially university campuses where they have the kind of control where they can deal with those. Pre-tax options where people can get transit passes and other transportation-related things pre-tax. So it basically gives them a reduction in the cost of that particular thing. Stanford, we gave free transit passes on Caltrain and local bus service. Charter services, people on campus could rent bus services from us. So if they had a conference on campus, we could go to the hotel, pick everybody up, and bring them in, or give them tours, or whatever. So whatever we could do through that kind of a system to minimize the number of cars coming onto campus, the number of single-occupant vehicles, we did that. Commute planning can be huge. We're all creatures of habit. We're in some sort of way of getting around, especially older people that have been driving forever and don't know how to read a transit schedule, or don't know how to get from point A to point B on a bike, whatever, to be able to provide a service where somebody can say, okay, look, all the financial things you're offering here are wonderful, but I don't know how to get from here to here other than driving. And being able to say, here's our website, go in, plug the point of origin, the destination, will give you all the options, or we'll do that for you. We'll figure it out and then answer any questions. And we'll hook you up with somebody who's experienced doing that, who has ridden that bike route or takes the train from that same place into campus. That's a commute buddy program, so that people get over that fear of doing something different, doing something new. I remember the first time I tried to figure out a transit map and schedule, and I remember how kind of scary it was. Is the bus really going to be here? Am I looking at the right route? All of that. Need to get to work on time. Car sharing is huge. Car rental when possible. Express buses. We were able to work out at Stanford a deal with AC Transit, which was on the east side of the bay. Stanford's on the peninsula. And if you can work out a deal with a transit agency that is typically 70 to 80% funded by the federal government, and you can work out some routes that benefit you and them, you've just cut your costs by 70%. And we were able to create this Trans-Bay Express service at, we ended up paying about 30% of the cost. So whenever you can create kind of partnerships and deals like that, they're out there to be had. It can be great. I'll talk about the Commute Club in a minute. Work shift management. Maybe people can come in before the peak hour or after the peak hour, leave at other times, so that they're not contributing to the craziness. Also, telecommuting can fit into that kind of category. Personal outreach, where you're doing targeted marketing. You may actually have people sending emails or calling people that maybe live within a half-mile of Caltrain, have a parking permit, and say, hey, did you know you can ride the train for free, save, because we give you a pass, save $1,000 a year on that, and you don't have to work on the train. You can do all kinds of stuff. And the promotions and events, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah. That's typically a jurisdiction that's doing that for other purposes other than a service to employees to encourage them to get out of their cars. So congestion management, definitely, like they're doing in London, sort of a thing. Oh, are you talking Stanford? Yeah, we have their what's called a Capri program, and that was a partnership with the Department of Transportation. And what we did with that was we gamified the incentive to get people to come during the non-peak hour. So if they came between 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 in the morning, or 4 to 5 and 6 to 7 in the evening for their departure, they would get points. Those points would accumulate. They could go to a website and play a Chutes and Ladders kind of game and win money. So it was based on RFID, but they're transitioning that to a smartphone application. So it wasn't to make people pay that came during the peak time. It was to incentivize people to come during the non-peak time. Yeah, and that can be tricky because you say, okay, we're going to get people onto campus here. What a great idea. However, if it's family housing, one of the people might not work for Stanford, and they may be commuting out and then commuting back in and adding to the traffic situation. If it's high density and typically single person housing kinds of things, then that's going to be dedicated to people that are at Stanford and benefit there. But yeah, housing on, like on a university campus can be very, very significant in reducing trips. So that's the overall. Just want to touch briefly on the commute club concept. The idea was generated through wanting to encourage all those people that are doing what we want them to do to feel like part of a group. And maybe it's a group effort. And so in 2002, we created the Commute Club with a bunch of rewards, paying people $300. Back then, it was only $150 or something like that. But paying people not to buy a parking permit, having the carpool program where you got reserved parking spaces and allowing people to have individual parking permits, so many of those a year, and that sort of thing. Carpool all the time. Subsidizing van pools, several $100s a month. We also had programs where if you were in the Commute Club and you got somebody to turn in their parking permit and join the Commute Club, we give you each $50. So we were using the people that were part of the club to be our emissaries, and going out there and recruiting more people to join the Commute Club. We also gave them free access to 12 hours to car rentals and car sharing. And annually we had two drawings, fall and spring, for those people that were part of the Commute Club. And we started off giving away trips to Hawaii, kind of a $3,000 value, and then at one point shifted just to giving the cash. So if you were the grand prize winner, you got your $3,000 or $3,500, and then there were all these iPhones and iPads and spa trips and things like that we would do for those people that were part of the program. So that part of it was going beyond recruiting people, but saying, we want to keep you as customers. We like you as customers, so we're doing these kinds of things to keep you in the program. Worked out well. Yeah. I've got a chart that comes up later on that'll show the growth in the program, but right now, less than 50% of the commuters are driving alone. 10 years ago, it was a 72% drive-alone rate. Now it's 47% drive-alone rate. So in 10 years, these programs were able to make that kind of an impact and meet that no net new peak hour commute trip goal that we had. This last one, Love Stories, Commute Heroes, Picture My Commute, all part of the marketing outreach to help us create this commute club identity. And we would actually go out and ask people, tell us why you love your alternative transportation commute. We actually got a couple of love stories, like this one couple that met on a tandem and got married. But yeah, it was all out of awe stuff. But several of these programs where we went out to people and said, tell us about your commute, or take a picture of your commute, or whatever it was. And we were able then to take these stories, these people, create posters and postcards, banners and other things with their faces on them to show that this is personal. These people that are in the commute club are you guys. You might even know this person. So it became more of not so much the administration saying we really want you to do this, but hey, my coworkers, students I go to school with, are encouraging me to do the same sort of thing. We started off with individuals on these posters and postcards, and we had some groups from departments come in and say, well, we've got 5 or 6 of us in this department. Why don't you take a picture of us? So we ended up taking pictures of those folks. So we had a campaign where we had departments, and we'd have anywhere from 4 or 5 up to 10 people in pictures saying, hey, the Department of loves their alternative transportation. Also did the kind of research for targeted marketing, so we could say, here are all the people with parking permits that live within 2 miles of each other. Let's do a focused email or outreach of some sort to those folks and say, did you know that there are 20 other people that live within blocks of you that come into the campus as well? So that was big. So basically, all these things are as part of an effort to get as many people out of their cars and into alternative transportation, sharing the ride, and convincing people that ride sharing is a perfectly natural thing. I mean, it happens out there. No, that's not the president. Outreach and marketing. Again, mentioned that earlier. It's huge. It's not a build it and they will come. These are some different elements. I won't spend a lot of time on this. But getting people in as many different ways as possible, whether it's through emails, whether it's through posters, whether it's through postcards, banners at parking lots or at the entrance to campus. For a while, we had a Burma Shave sign campaign. How many know what a Burma Shave sign is? Yeah. Okay, a few. Burma Shave, back in the 20s and 30s, was a big shaving cream company, and they advertised by having signs along the roadways periodically, like every mile or so, and they would have the little slogan that would kind of rhyme. And you'd, do this, do this, do this, do this, buy Burma Shave. So it was that sort of thing. So we took that idea at the entrances to campus and did this Burma Shave thing where we'd have this, basically the last message was join the commute club. But it was some cute little saying that kind of rhymed as they drove in. We had to discontinue it because everybody else on campus wanted to do that. So there were these Burma Shave signs all over the place. So the provost finally said, no, stop it, can't do that. So in addition to the folks hired to administer these kinds of things, we also developed a peak trip task force. And that was made up of individuals within each one person from each unit, administrative unit or school on campus, that would come together once or twice a year. We talked to them about our efforts. We talked to them about what they could do in their departments, whether they were their own incentive programs that we might help fund or that they could fund on their own, so that we could get people via messaging from the administration, messaging from us, messaging from other commute club members, as well as coming from internally within the department, the kinds of messaging that they could provide. So it was kind of reaching people from all different directions. turned out to be really effective, and the people in the task force tended to be very motivated people, which is really helpful. So these are some of the posters. This one over here actually had a wheel on the side, and you could rotate it, and it would tell you about how many pounds of CO2 in each gallon of gasoline, and how many calories you can burn off walking a mile, and all that kind of thing. So it was an interactive poster. But these were real people at Stanford. You can see the Hoover Tower over there. Most of them came to us and said, "Hey, put us on a poster." So not only were they on the posters, some of the time they were on banners that were spread around campus and that sort of thing that were rotated on a regular basis. This was from, I think, Tell Us Your Story. All these people sent information in. We got their pictures. So if you go to our website and you click on somebody's face, a little phrase comes up, and if you double-click, then their whole story comes up. So this is kind of, in a way, the face of the Commute Club. But some really neat stories that came in. I don't think he's on here, but one guy that started riding his bike once a week and then became twice a week. And then he got rid of his car. He was riding all the time, became an avid cyclist and racer, and was entering into competitions and doing that sort of thing. And another person who had cerebral palsy started forcing herself to walk from the train station to the center of campus, and it just helped her health in so many different ways. And people who, one of my favorite stories, I think, is the nurse who, she was a single parent, had 2 kids at home, had an hour commute both ways, each way, and decided to take the train. That freed her up an hour each direction to study. And she was able to get this certificate and advance within her profession and get a promotion and move on. And that was because she got out of her car and she got into the train, where you can do all kinds of things with the time you have there. Again, we had a campaign on personal health. In this case, it was exercise and how much money you could save each year if you didn't have a car, or if you had a car but didn't use it for commuting. I mean, that can be substantial money when you add in the gas, the maintenance, the bridge tolls, and everything else. So examples of the kinds of things we tried to push out in front of people. If finances won't get them, maybe the environment will get them. If that doesn't get them, maybe personal health. So all different kinds of interests are out there. And if you can, over time, touch on all of those, maybe you're going to hit the kind of thing that gets everybody. We worked with professors. This professor was doing research on CO2 absorption in the ocean and talking about the impacts on coral reefs, and it was really neat. This poster ended up at the Lucile Packard Children's Hospital, taped inside of the MRI machine. So as the kids got pushed in, this is what they looked at. So some of these actually, we always ordered extras because people would call and say, "Hey, I want to post one in my cube," or "I want for this, that, or the other thing." So they get out there and they're of interest. We did a takeoff on the Got Milk. We did Got Glaciers. And that lasted for a little while. Got to be flexible in this business. The professor we were working with had a very diligent graduate student who said, "Those aren't glaciers. That's sea ice." So we changed our program to adjust, and we still had the support of the professor and now the graduate student. So we kind of had fun with that one. I mean, it works. Taking advantage of what goes on in your particular life. We have squirrels all over Stanford. So this squirrel was giving us the message about alternative transportation. 4 or 5 years ago, when gas prices were getting close to $5, we had a campaign where we encouraged everybody to draw a line somewhere. If gas gets above this level, I'm going to start taking the train twice a week or 3 times a week, or I'm going to carpool, or I'm going to do this, that, or the other. So we had a lot of people that would go on our website and make their commitment, and there were even a couple of people in my office that made the switch when it got beyond their level. And So helping people set their own goals in some cases can be very beneficial. Stanford won the Rose Bowl a couple years ago, so we had to take advantage of that. One of our posters congratulating the campus and encouraging. A few hundred of our Commute Club members, we all got together, drew them in by offering cupcakes. So these are all people that like cupcakes. But again, marketing, it's a group, folks. It's just not the administration saying do this, but there are a whole bunch of campus people that are doing this, faculty, staff, students. These are just some of the ads that we had regularly in the Stanford paper, not the student paper, but the one that went out to the faculty, staff. We'd give annual gifts to people. Sometimes there were really small things like back scratchers. First batch we got, for some reason the color came off of the back scratcher, so people were getting color on the back of their clothes, but we got that rectified. One of the last things we did were mugs, and we were sensitive. We got a left-handed and a right-handed version. I had a student who said, "Wow, that was nice." Yeah, okay. Other kinds of things that we had a competition, not a competition, but a rewards effort where people that had been in the Commute Club for 10 years, they were able to pick one of these gifts. If they were 5 years or more, there was another gift. And then if people didn't want one of those gifts, we could give them a gift card that they could then provide a contribution to the charity of their choice, basically. Metrics. I'm sure you were all into metrics here. At Stanford, these were the metrics that we used. That first one, it was the peak hour trips, was a big one. And for 8 weeks a year, hoses were laid out, and they counted the traffic coming in during the morning peak, traffic going out during the evening peak. Once a week, they had people with clipboards writing down the last 4 digits of the license plates at the entry and exit points so they could determine what the pass-through traffic was. And that was how they measured whether or not we were meeting our net new peak hour commute trip goal. And fortunately, we were able to do it every year while I was there. But there could be other things, like UCLA has a total daily trip. I think there are 125,000 trips, and I think they're somewhere around 123,000. So they've got a little flex, and they've been doing really well, even though the campus has been growing. Commute mode shares, very important. Again, for us, the peak hour trip was the big one. That would allow us to be in compliance with the growth plan from the county. Commute shares to be able to help us determine the kind of impact we're having on the mode split. And though what we did doesn't necessarily provide it down to the 100th decimal point, it provides us that trend, what direction it's going, and I'll show you that in a minute. Participation in the Commute Club, parking permit sales. I think 3 years after we started the program, we kind of peaked with parking permit sales, and then it started going down. And it started to kind of creep back up again because the campus is growing. Shuttle ridership, carbon footprint, I'll show you a chart on that. Program costs can be very important to certain agencies. And then the parking construction costs avoided. I'll share a chart with you. This is kind of ugly, but basically the blue is the drive alone. Started the program in 2002, 2012. We'd gone from 72% down to 47%. Pretty significant drop. The red is the Caltrain use, or the commuter rail that goes up and down the peninsula. And fortunately, the core of Stanford was only about a mile from the train station. So it was super convenient. Oftentimes, your location and the regional transit and the service that's available in your area dictates in a large way the kinds of resources that you may offer your employees. And it's good to see the cycling in the green there that went from 7% to over 12%. Yeah. 13, 14, but it started to level out a little bit. It was a good time to leave. Blame it on the next guy. I say, hey, it was fine while I was there. But yeah, I think that...
I mean, not to discount the remarkable
No.
achievement, but maybe there's some limit to how far...
Yeah, and I think that when you get to that point and you compare this is one where we were always looking at what impact are we having, how much money are we spending, are we meeting that no net new peak hour commute goal? And if we got to the point where, oops, we're really getting close to this commute goal, and we're leveling it out here, then we would say, maybe we need to offer some additional programs. Maybe we need to expand the Trans-Bay shuttle that is now jam-packed, standing room only. We're turning people away. Maybe we need to create a larger park and ride lot on the east side of the bay so more people could park there to get on the bus. And so it's to the point where they may be wanting to expand some programs or maybe even add some additional programs. You got to realize that with the campus growing 46.8% right there, you're still getting more and more people in there because you're maintaining that percentage rate even though the campus population is growing. DK. There were incremental changes, like one year they completed the entire campus loop for bike lanes, but maybe not huge. There was an undercrossing under the Caltrain bridge that appeared at one point there. In the last couple of years, we've started putting pedestrian bike stop signs at crosswalks. Probably very non-traditional, but it was driving motorists crazy to have these cyclists just blasting. I mean, sure, it happens here too. I know it happens here too, but so crazy stuff like that. I think there's always more you can do. It seems like that. I think more focused marketing and outreach to the people that were closer, and maybe even additional incentives. But I think a lot of this was education, outreach, and encouragement. All the different events that we had where we had people out there encouraging people, the classes we had, just a variety of things that took the reason Stanford got platinum. Those kinds of things to help reduce or increase the rate there. There were places that were a challenge, but there was a budget, a line item budget each year for adding and replacing bike racks. So getting rid of the old toaster style or the wheel benders. I don't know if they still have those concrete blocks around campus. That's all they had when I was going to school here. And then they couldn't ride it because the tire was bent. Not that I ever did that. But there's a set program where X number of thousands of dollars are set up to add the lightning bolt racks and expand bike parking areas and that sort of thing. Again, keep in mind, even though the percentage is the same, the campus has grown. So those consistent percentages represent larger numbers of people. So if over this time the campus grew by 5,000 or 6,000 and you're still at this level over here, you're still adding people. You're just not adding people into the biking world as fast as you were before. And I think, again, there could be additional incentives provided in order to make an even bigger dent. And at Stanford, there are so many people that live fairly close. but they tend to be the people that make more money because it ain't cheap in Palo Alto. And a lot of those people like their cars. They have places to go. They might be physicians, and they've got clinics over here, and they got clinics over here. Or yes. No, it was any commuter. So almost all of the undergraduates, the 8,000 undergraduates, lived on campus. So they weren't part of the program. We had about 2,000 or more postgrads were part of it because they all lived off campus. And then about 60% of the graduate students lived on campus. But that other 40% was eligible for the program. The only thing that the students couldn't get was the Caltrain Go Pass, but they were eligible for all the other benefits. And the main reason there was, one, the expense, and two, the target audience for the peak hour commute was really the faculty. Not the faculty, but the faculty and staff, primarily the staff. The students, postdocs, grad students, weren't a big chunk of that peak hour commute group. So those are a couple reasons why. But just recently, found another funding source, and postdocs and off-campus graduate students now are getting the Go Pass. Everybody's getting it. That's kind of new. It's new in California. Yeah. I'm torn on that on a campus like Stanford or UC Davis because there are bikes everywhere. Everybody has a bicycle, just about. But I think in a Stanford setting, it might be a commuter or it might be a visitor that comes in on the train, gets off the train, hops on the bike, comes into campus, finds a pod, parks it, and then they do their business and they're out again. But so we're working on, they are working on that as we speak. But again, I don't know that there's going to be a huge demand for that on a campus where I could see a Washington city where somebody comes out, they don't have a place to keep a bike, and they come out and they need to get somewhere quickly. But there may be some applications. Oh, is that right? Cool. Am I finished at 2:30, or are questions finished at 2:30? Oh, okay. I can talk slower.
There are going to be a lot of questions.
Okay, no, I want to talk slower. The drive-alone rates. The blue, university employees. The red, all commuters. And the reason the all commuters is less, I think, because that includes the hospital folks, which during most of this time didn't have the Go Pass or the Rail Pass. And it also includes the students who didn't have the Rail Pass. But now all of them have it, so that should start going up fairly soon, and I think should get close to the blue line. Bottom line there is there's only one place I know of that actually looks at the whole campus community and says, based on the whole campus community, here's the percentage of people that drive to campus. Most places just look at it as, look at your commuters and look at the percentage of them that are driving alone and all of that. So I just stuck that on there if somebody said, well, what about your whole campus? So if we take everybody, including the residents, we've got a 26% drive alone. Commute Club membership. 3,600 in 2002 when it started, up almost tripled to 9,000. And if you look at the number of commuters, we're probably looking at 17,000 to 18,000 commuters. So half of the commuters, roughly, are members of the Commute Club. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Oh, I have another question.
Oh, yeah.
So it's about your market.
Only one each? No, go ahead. Yeah, no, okay. Had a manager that handled that sort of thing, came up with the concepts, and we would talk about it with within the group, and this is what our campaign's going to be in the fall, this is what it's going to be in the spring. And that person focused on that, as well as putting together the electronic emails. She had a couple of people that worked with her. Also, the webmeister reported to her as well, because we had so many programs going on, so many updates, it made sense to have the web person report to the marketing person.
So did she have a background?
She did. Yeah. Didn't have a whole lot of experience with transportation, but had experience, which to me was the most important thing. You can teach people the transportation aspect of it, at least in the TDM side, as long as they come in with some group of skills that you can. CO2 emissions. This was one of my favorite. We did a projection here because we didn't have the data back to 1990, but we took the population. We also looked at the average vehicle emissions that the federal government, they put out, the average emissions of cars. So we wrapped all that in and figured our 1990 level was about 26,000 tons. So you can see the impact. Some of that is the cars are more efficient. We'll grant that. But a lot of it was a huge reduction in the number of people that were actually driving. Yes? This is total. Yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping nobody tons each, Could be done. Yeah. I mean, again, what we were doing is this was for sustainability purposes and just to show trends, and doing it per capita is just another way of doing it. Probably easily done. This is one, again, that we didn't set out to accomplish, but it was kind of an additional benefit. If we looked at drive-alone rates, that's not working. There it is. Drive-alone rates in 2002, 2003, and 2004 of these different groups, and we look at where they were in these years, dropped dramatically in each of those cases. And if we had not changed these drive-alone rates, we would have had to have built another 3,100 parking spaces. And at Stanford, we're going underground at the cost of $40,000 to $50,000 per space. So we saved a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. And that's just the capital cost. Had they borrowed that money, you'd have to have the finance on there, and then there's the maintenance and the enforcement and all the other things that go along with parking. So that, to me, is a big sales factor if you're working with some jurisdiction or university and somebody doesn't want to spend money on a fluff called TDM. Got a different take on it. These were some of the funding sources that we used at Stanford. Parking permit revenues paid for the shuttle system and the commute club and some of those rewards. We also got money from a Stanford infrastructure program that paid for some of the bicycle facility improvements and paid for basically all of the parking capital costs, which was great. And something rather unique at Stanford was general use permit or GUP fee. And I mentioned the GUP process, and there were about 120 different conditions that the university had to meet in order to meet the requirements of this permit. So the university looked at what will it cost to pay for all of those fees, or all of those improvements, those conditions, and they said, we're going to assess buildings on campus. Anybody who adds net new square footage, which is why we have the GUP anyway, any department that adds that is going to have to pay a fee that, over the length of the GUP, will pay for all of these conditions. So Stanford was not only taxing its buildings to improve or maintain the infrastructure, but it created this additional fee, which I think last time I looked was somewhere around $80 a square foot that was assessed to square footage. So that went to pay for a whole bunch of things, including some of the TDM efforts, since that was a condition of the GUP. Grants, I think I mentioned the DOT grant that we got to do the Capri program, which was encouraging people to travel during non-peak times. Partnerships, we had one with AC Transit, originally had one with Caltrain. Where they had the Go Pass, we worked a deal with them to create a program just for university people, and it was called the U-Pass for the first 6 to 8 months, so that our people could get on, and we could pay for them at a reduced rate. And it worked so well, they turned it into the Go Pass and offered it to all the employers. So that was a good example of another partnership that really paid off well long term. I'm just going to touch on a few of these because I want to leave as much time as possible on the questions. But in the process of selecting tools, I mean, you just don't grab everything and take it in and say, this is going to work here. You've got to determine whether or not it's going to address one of those yes buts for your particular environment and the people that are working. Student and faculty resources, I think, are really crucial. Faculty person that really was the prompt to get the DOT grant, which was huge. We had students that every now and then would come in and say, early on, I can't get the Marguerite schedule, the shuttle schedule, on my pad. Do you remember pad? Or the what? No, it was called a pad. Personal, yeah. Like a Palm Pilot, PDA. I'm sorry. Yeah. I got it. Okay. Anyway, this antique, he couldn't get the program on it, and he said, "Look, I'll write it for you." I said, "Great, come in here, do this." So we did that, and we were able to post that on a website, and people that had that device were able to use that. Looking at getting the biggest bang for the buck, so don't just go out there and grab something because you think it's going to work. But if you think that you can really leverage that, like throwing out a few $100,000 to AC Transit to pay for this incredible express service to the East Bay, maybe that makes sense. The synergistic effects, I think, are huge in looking at a comprehensive program. All those different elements that address all those yes buts. There could be people that, well, if you didn't have the expanded shuttle system, you didn't have the car sharing on campus, maybe they wouldn't take the train. Or maybe if you didn't have emergency ride home, maybe they wouldn't carpool. But if you have all these parts, these things that can be kind of insurance programs, that people feel like, I'm taken care of. I mean, whatever happens, there's going to be a fallback position for me. So that's what I meant by the synergistic effects of these different programs. If you've got them all there, they can work well together, and you can maybe end up with a much bigger impact than if you just had one or two elements of the program. Won't spend a lot of time on this either, but whenever you have a big program like that, you'll have people from the community, faculty, staff, students coming in, alums, other people saying, I've got the best idea, and I really think this is going to work. Or you've got an alum that comes in with that new electric vehicle that is just going to really change the world. Have you built one yet? No. Okay, so you don't know if it really works. Well, no, but we've got it all figured out. Go figure out if it really works. Bring it back. We'll see if there's an application. So we had a lot of people coming in with some wild and crazy ideas. Channeling student energy. On occasion, we had students come in with their agenda, especially people that were part of SUCD, that, well, yeah, during my campaign, I made a promise that I was going to do this, so I really want you guys to implement this program. It would fit in really well if we did it this way, and then you could still tell your constituency that, you made an impact on this, but we're going to have to fit it in here. Or if you go off and you do this, that will work really well with our program. Okay. So, and the unproven approaches like that electric vehicle or other kinds of things. That's kind of it. So I'm open for questions. Thank you. I know it's a whirlwind tour, but this could be a one-day. Oh, absolutely. Just don't make it too long. I couldn't even remember the name of that device. So, yes. The question was our return on investment, did it meet or exceed our expectations? And it did. And all I can say is, because I'm not at Stanford anymore, I can't talk about their budget, and that's kind of, in a way, confidential information. But it would have cost just for that parking's instruction a whole lot more to build all that parking, maintain it, enforce it, and all that kind of stuff than it cost us in 10 years to do the TDM. So for Stanford, it was well worth the investment just on that. And then there are all those other things that you can say are priceless in terms of the goodwill it bought from community, from other jurisdictions. We had other employers that really didn't like our department because they said, our city council keeps telling us we should do what Stanford's doing, and get the results that Stanford's getting. So it was great for us and well worth every penny spent on it. EK. We did that on each of the different modes. And it could range from less than $1 per person per trip to, in some cases, per year, to several $100s per year per person for that trip. A lot of people might want to spend time on that. I went back to the larger goal. And I said, looking at that and saying, this is bringing in this many people. It's more expensive. But if we didn't spend that money, who would not be using it, and how many trips would that be coming in on campus? So it was really looking at what we had budgeted, looking at the long-term goals and our up goals and other things, and saying, we're meeting this, we're within budget, and this is a reasonable cost. If we were to go out and do it ourselves versus using Caltrain or something like that, we'd be spending 3 times. So we did those kinds of comparisons. Sure. TDM team structure. That's hard because in the transportation parking department, it was a team effort, and everybody was engaged in it. Even the people in the front counter that were selling parking permits were also selling commute club memberships. But if I were to look at just the marketing group, marketing/outreach group, I had a manager, had somebody managing the website, had 2 TDM coordinators that were doing outreach efforts, going out and doing events that were doing planning, all that kind of thing. And then another half-time person was doing some other sorts of things. So that was kind of the marketing outreach. But then, I mean, our Marguerite program that had 4 people in it, the whole shuttle system was huge, very integral to the. We had somebody that kind of came up with rough designs. Like our web person was kind of talented there. Our outreach and marketing manager was kind of talented there, but sometimes came up with concepts, shipped that to, outsourced it, and then they came back with the final product. So, a lot of that, we did so many different things. It would have been kind of hard to have one person. Were there people that were unhappy with the whole TDM effort? No. I don't remember anybody that came in and said, I'm really ticked off. I didn't have people, again, and I think there's a different level of knowledge here than there is at a Stanford, where there isn't a student committee, there isn't a faculty committee, there isn't a staff committee that is intimately involved in this. I take that back. I remember one professor who started doing some analysis on the empty buses that were running around campus. And, I mean, that one even went to the provost. I mean, this is, when you're running a bus system, you have to have the service there or people won't use it. And it's kind of a catch-22 sort of thing very often. So there were times of the day where we didn't have a lot of people on the bus, but if we didn't have the service, people wouldn't rely on it. And if they didn't rely on it, then we weren't supporting the whole TDM effort. Now, you get into the peak commute times, and the buses were jam-packed, or if the professor was out there looking at the empty direction of the bus as opposed to the full direction of the bus during the peak time. But in general, no. Always parking-related issues. But from a TDM standpoint, I don't remember one group or person that don't like this.
You were giving people lots of incentives. Did you not increase parking rates at the same time? Those states.
Parking rates would go up. Again, I really strongly subscribe to the concept of having TDM and parking in the same place, so that those groups don't create a level of animosity. So, whenever we raised the parking rates significantly, 6 or 7%, there were people that would grumble. But if you looked at our costs from a regional standpoint, we were kind of so parking. I won't say always a headache, but there's always something going on. There are always people that aren't happy, and there are people that just philosophically don't like to pay for parking. Whereas the TDM, all these wonderful things. So that side of the house was getting all these compliments. Every now and then we get a compliment for parking, but that was rare. It was usually some kind of in general, the question was, what are the most important elements of the program, and are there things that we would continue to do, even now that the program has proven to be successful? I think what is in place now at Stanford, it's very important to continue those and even expand, because the campus is growing. We still have that trip limit. We tried things that didn't work that we don't do anymore. We had this great idea. What if we hand out BART passes to people? And we'll do a pilot project. Anybody in the East Bay that wants a BART pass, and we worked a deal with this was before BART had smart cards, and they were going to give us the same kind of card that their staff had. So people could just tap on, and it would it would indicate what the cost was. Stanford was going to pay the cost for the employee. And we figured there were about 2,000 people in that area that could probably take advantage of that and take the BART pass and go under the bay and down to Millbrae and hop over on Caltrain and take that to campus. Or, on the other side, they could take BART down to one of our express buses, hop on that, and come over. Brilliant. And it's free. 11 people took advantage of it. And I think what we decided, well, we're not going to continue this, but it was probably because there were too many links. They had to get to BART, and then from BART, there was time, and then they had to get onto a bus or switch from BART to Caltrain, come to the campus, and then hop on a shuttle to get to where they're going or ride a bike or whatever. But out of 2,000 people, we had 11 people. And some of them we had to kick off because we said this is only for commuting, and they were working. So it was even less than that. So to be honest, there were a couple things like that that we tried and said, what's the return on investment on this puppy? Or is it worth creating that whole thing? It wasn't. So there are things like that that we've done and said, that's a bust, but it was worth trying. It didn't cost us that.
Helpful in sort of maintaining or drumming up support for TDM efforts? Or if there are other things that also substitute?
The GUP process was huge as it relates to TDM. There were a few things that were going on before this GUP. There were a couple of other GUPs, but there wasn't one where they actually measured the traffic. They do kind of counts and, okay, how many carpoolers are there, and how many on bikes, and how many on cars, and how many are carpooling, and okay, yeah, that's close. But this was actual counts. And the university could have taken a different route. There were 15 different intersections in the region that they could have helped pay for to improve the capacity of those intersections instead of doing TDM. And I think they took the high road. They said, that may help a little bit in terms of the functions of those intersections, but in terms of the benefit to the community, air quality, all those kinds of things, probably minimal. And so they decided, and they could have always defaulted back to that had they gotten to the point where they couldn't meet the no net. But I think over time they saw all these other benefits, and they use TDM now as a recruitment tool. You go through the manual or the brochure that they give to potential employees, and you'll probably see in a dozen different places reference to the different programs that are being offered. And then you look at the stress reduction and other kinds of things. And Stanford has a very extensive, what they call a Be Well program, focused on positive, good, healthy behavior by employees. And they reinforce that kind of thing. And they'll reduce your health insurance premiums if you do certain things. And so it in a way became ingrained in that 10 years within the community. And you can see by the change in the drive-alone rate, it changed the culture there. It went from a large majority of people driving alone to less than half. And that's huge. So I think it's become so much part of the fabric of Stanford now, I can't imagine that it would go away, or that they would take some of these things away. And a lot of people would look at some of these things now as entitlements, if you will. You've had that for 10 years. You're going to, what? You can't do that. It's now a benefit. There was a question here. White shirt, UC Davis. You know? The question was, have we looked at the what impacts, positive impacts it might have had on the environment or sustainability? We were very focused on that GUP goal, no net new peak hour commute trips, and a few other things too. We would have left that to the Office of Sustainability, operations oriented, and said, we've got a goal. This is what you hired us for. This is what you're paying us to do, and these are the resources we have to pull it off. And we're doing it successfully. And Office of Sustainability, if you want to play with numbers, go play with numbers. I'm not going to argue with what to date had been a success in that we were able to meet. Not so much that the question was whether or not building the parking structure, if there were any negative effects over time to having constructed those parking spaces that we measured as we looked at how much money we were saving. Oh. We didn't consider the loss of income, potential income that would have resulted. Had TDM been over here and parking over in this other department, whoever was in charge of parking probably would have been screaming about that, saying, look at these costs I have. I've got these customers whose needs I need to meet, and I need to pay for a shuttle over here out of these funds. And then the TDM person going to be arguing, well, wait a minute, we've got this goal that we need to meet, and cars coming onto campus, and on and on and on. So we didn't look at that again. The university's primary interest was that GUP goal to start with, and then we had those other side benefits. And so that's basically where we were. Mayor. Oh, well, they don't say former President Carter. Question is whether or not our program did much benchmarking to compare how Stanford was doing with other universities. Since I had been at UC Davis for so many years, when I went to Stanford, they included me in their annual gathering and their listserv of all the UC parking directors. They maintain a matrix that looks at all kinds of different things. That is basically a benchmarking document. And I would say that the UC campuses are, in most cases, far and away more advanced than other universities. A lot of them are in areas where TDM is important. At other places, or maybe it's an urban setting or something like that, where it's just assumed that 35% drive-alone rate is fine because everybody's taking the bus or the train or whatever. But most of them, few exceptions, are suburban. That kind of thing, and periodically at Stanford, we would do that kind of thing where we'd phone around, especially in the early years, to find out what programs might have been out there that we weren't aware of that we thought might work at Stanford and help us achieve our goals. So some of that goes on. I don't think there's a lot of that ends up in publication. There are some professional organizations. But sometimes I would have gotten calls from a consultancy that was doing some research for a university and it asked for a whole bunch of information and said it's confidential, we won't put names on it, so please share your budgets, share your mode splits, share all this stuff. So documents might come out, but you couldn't identify who was doing what because that was part of the condition of sharing. Okay, great, thank you. Yeah. That and difference between Stanford and every other campus or every other infrastructure. So it's spread out over the whole campus. They're part of the campus infrastructure instead of saying parking is going to be. And it also does away with the 10 years ago, so he said this many millions of dollars.
The UC campus don't zone they can pretty much do what they want. So I mean, given that, they've done a very good job. I mean, given
More chaotic